Welcome to the Success Sensei podcast for anyone interested in success, happiness, and balance. We'll teach you how to be a black belt at life. And now, your host, former professional fighter, multiple world champion, entrepreneur, and investor, Robert Devan.
Bowing in. This is Roundhouse Rob, the Success Sensei, helping you to improve your life one kick and punch at a time. And today I'm going to be talking about how to survive physical confrontation. How to survive physical confrontation. A lot of people that have never done martial arts or self-defense before can have plenty of nightmares regarding being physically confronted and not knowing what to do and that freezing in a situation when you don't know what to do and you feel a lot of fear, as I said, especially if you've never trained in martial arts before. But there are many things that you can do to prevent physical confrontation and to survive physical confrontation. My whole life I've been involved in teaching martial arts. I started off teaching self-defense. I got very involved in karate, kickboxing, MMA. But self-defense is where I started, and everything I ever did, all the competitive sports that I've ever done, meant nothing unless you could actually defend yourself in the street. And I met many people that were very good at competitive martial arts, or very good at fitness martial arts, that I don't know if they would have had the ability to defend themselves in the street. I did work for 8 years in the security industry as well, so I did do plenty of door work, a lot of door work. Did a lot of retail security as well, which was tough enough, probably one of the hardest jobs I've ever had to do. And as I said, a lot of door work. So I saw a lot of physical confrontation, verbal, physical, actual fighting. School wasn't an amazing experience for me. So even at school level, I got to experience plenty of physical confrontation. So yeah, I know a lot about the subject. It's something that I've taught and been involved in for a very, very long time. Starting off, okay. How not to be a victim. I mean, I understand nowadays talking about things like how not to be a victim leads to people accusing you of victim shaming and stuff like that. But I mean, you can do things to prevent and to lower the statistics of you being of you getting attacked. I was driving home the other night from work, and I was driving through a known not great area, a high crime area with very poor lighting. And I saw a young girl walking up the street, oblivious to everything because her earphones were in her ears. And I did think that if anyone was lurking in that area, as I said, this is a well-known area, not to be a great area, high crime area. If anyone was lurking in the area, I mean, she would stand out as being a perfect victim. So, I mean, you don't want to be a victim. You don't want to be a target. So the very first thing is you have to be aware. I personally don't really like listening to earphones if I'm walking in or if I'm cycling, just for safety purposes. I just don't think I have I can't be fully focused. And if someone were to jump out, it's hard enough to react appropriately during certain situations. But if you really don't see any signs of anything happening and you can't hear, which is one of your main senses that you're going to need for self-defense, then you really are, again, it's all about statistics. You're limiting your chances of being able to survive. You're limiting your chances of being able to actually do anything, or being able to escape the scenario, or being able to defend yourself. The next thing is walking in an unconfident manner. Now, I know a lot of people say, oh, he's trying to change my walk, or he's trying to change who I am, or whatever. But I mean, obviously, if you have two people side by side, one's walking confidently and the other one is walking a little bit sheepish with their head down and bad posture, they could be perceived by a potential attacker. They could be perceived as being an easier target. So you don't want that person to be you. So just walk confidently. Now, make sure now you don't do the opposite. And the opposite is walk arrogantly or overconfidently, because that in turn also attracts a lot of unwanted attention and can attract people looking for a challenge or people looking for physical confrontation. If you are presenting yourself as the tough guy or the tough girl, that can bring unwanted physical confrontation, just as much as appearing to be meek. I've met many people who are very tall and look very strong and are very well built, and they've told me over and over again that they are targets when they're in certain situations, nightclubs or pubs, and there's drink and there's drugs, and they're viewed as a target by people who are looking for physical confrontation, someone looking for a challenge. They're viewed as being worthy of a challenge, or I could only imagine people in that frame of mind wanting to take out the large, like for an ego boost, the largest person or the most threatening looking person in the room or in the area. So you don't really want that to be you either. You definitely don't want to stand out as being the macho man or the macho woman, and you definitely don't want to be meek. So you want to be in between, confident but not overly confident and not underconfident. I know it's a little bit of a balancing act, but it is worth thinking about. I mean, walk briskly with plenty of arm movement, plenty of leg movement, and continue walking. If you potentially see or sense a group or an individual, see, the problem nowadays is we try to use logic and we try not to judge and we try not to stereotype people. So as a result, even though our gut instinct might be telling us that we should be crossing the road or we should be avoiding certain people or certain situations, we don't want to make those judgments about others, because and I understand from a day-to-day point of view, you don't really want to be judging others, you don't want to be discriminating, you don't want to be imagining the worst in people. But from a self-defense point of view, if you ignore your gut instinct, the only times I've ever really made bad decisions in my life was when I ignored my gut instinct. When you ignore your gut instinct, you are leaving yourself open. You could be right. You could be your gut instinct could be right. So if you choose to ignore it and you choose to use logic and think, well, I'm going to use logic to overcome my feelings of nervousness around a certain group of people. If you choose to do that, then again, it's all about statistics. You are opening yourself up to walking straight headfirst into a situation that could have been avoided. People that are going to attack you, or people that are of that frame of mind, don't think like you or me. They think very, very differently. They're not applying the same social norms, the same social rules in their lives. They're not worried about the law. They're not worried about all of these things that actually prevents us from being able to defend themselves. They're not worried about discriminating. They're not worried about harming you. They're not worried about judging you. So when you automatically start worrying about repercussions and start worrying about, what if I do defend myself, I'll get into more trouble, or what if I cross the road and I hurt these people's feelings, or from a self-defense point of view, you can't do that. I mean, obviously an urban environment is very, very different from a wartime environment. But I mean, in wartime, an enemy is an enemy. You don't try to humanize them. You don't try to justify it. You literally try to survive. And I mean, at the end of the day, in an urban environment, I know it's very different from war. Obviously, I personally have no experience of war, so I can only imagine, and I can only go off the movies and the books that I have read. But I don't know, it's a very, very different environment. But and in the urban environment, in the urban jungle, it's the same objective, and that is to survive, to minimize injury, and to survive, to continue on living. That's it in its simplistic terms. So you need to extract yourself from any situation that your gut instinct is telling you to avoid. Only humans kind of would try to bypass their natural instincts. So what I mean by that is, if a dog was going by an alleyway, say if a dog was or a cat was going by an alleyway and they sensed danger, they wouldn't go down that alleyway, they would continue walking past the alleyway. But as human beings, we have the ability to counteract our instinct. So we would say to ourselves, my apprehension isn't real, or I'm being foolish, or don't judge people that I'm sensing fear from in that alleyway, or nothing's going to happen, our statistics are on my side. No matter how we justify it to ourselves, we have the ability to overcome and to bypass our gut instinct, and we can make the mistake of traveling down that alleyway, and maybe nothing will happen majority of times, but maybe that one time something will happen, and really you could have and should have avoided it. So do listen to your gut instinct. Our gut instinct is a lot more highly tuned than you realize. The next thing is, as I said, staying present and staying aware, not walking around like in a zombie state, looking at your phone. I mean, phone crime is through the roof. I mean, people cycling by, snatching your phone. There's more ways of attacking somebody and of physically confronting somebody and of mugging somebody than you can possibly actually think up yourself as a normal, rational human being. So you're automatically at a disadvantage because you cannot react as quick as someone that can perform an action. So you see this in fighting all the time. That's why the person who is doing the majority of attacking generally has the higher stats for being for winning and for landing the most shots. So it's kind of equivalent to if you had a race with somebody and they had to run backwards the 100 meters and you could run forward. So they had to run it with their back to the 100 meters. They had to do a full sprint backwards, but you were allowed to do a full sprint forwards. I mean, even if they're a pretty good runner, really, with a full sprint forwards, you should be beating them. So it's kind of like reacting and someone performing an action and you trying to react. It's like running backwards. You can't react as quick as someone can perform an action. So you really don't want to hinder that by looking at the ground or by listening to your music or being bet into your head into your phone, watching your phone and not being conscious of your environment, especially if it's only a short period of time that you're actually walking. You can do without music or social media or anything like that. Hands in your pockets obviously puts you in a disadvantage. If you're carrying something, you generally carry it in your weaker hand, so your more dominant hand is ready to react if needs be. Going around a corner, you'd go wide around the corner. You wouldn't. I mean, we've all done this where we take a corner fairly tight, and if there had been someone walking and someone with intent to harm us walking from the opposite direction, we would have walked straight into them. So go around corners. Watch out for dimly lit entranceway or doorway where people could be hiding. A lot of stuff is common sense. But common sense isn't as common as we'd like to think that it is. So it's definitely all about making sure that you're staying in the present tense, you're staying focused. People will say, oh, you have to be paranoid. It's not paranoia. It's just healthy awareness. It doesn't have to be paranoia. You don't have to be afraid by it or freaked out or looking over your shoulder or which again will just draw negativity towards you, will just draw the problem that you're trying to avoid. It could potentially draw towards you, so you don't really want to do that because the rain is absolutely lashing outside and there's a lot of wind, so hopefully it's not going to affect this recording. Just in case you do hear lashing rain outside, I'm in my office, but there's a few windows here, so I can see a lot of rain and a lot of wind. Anyway, back to the task at hand. So if somebody does confront you, the first thing, it's really easy. Your life is not worth risking, so run. Get out of there. If you have the opportunity to escape. Leg it. Don't be worried about loss of face. Go back to what we were saying. Objective number one in a wartime scenario is to survive and limit injury. So someone confronts you and you are able to run. Get out of there. Even people who are trained and have trained a long time probably should exit. Maybe harder for them to do so because of their training, but really you don't know what odds are against you. And normally, if somebody is going to attack an adult, and an adult kind of arguably in their prime or not, so in other words, not a really young person and not an old person and not somebody who is obviously injured or non-able-bodied or anything like that. If somebody attacks an adult in their adult years, it's because they have the element of surprise on their side. It's because they could be armed, and they could have confidence from being high as a kite or being so drunk that they cannot feel pain. And more than likely, they could have, besides being armed, they could have plenty of people to back them up, whether right beside them or behind you or waiting around the corner. So to engage them in a scenario that you weren't ready for and you don't know what exactly is occurring, it again is reducing your odds. So you absolutely get out of there as quick as you can, and worry about loss of face and worry about your ego and all those kind of things afterwards, after you have survived and from the comfort and safety of your own home. So if you can suddenly turn and leg it, what do? Well, you generally use preemptive striking. Now, this could be a contentious subject because obviously we're going to have to talk about the law for a second. I'm not a solicitor, I'm not a lawyer, so you're going to have to read your own whatever the jurisdiction, the law in the jurisdiction where you reside, you're going to have to read it. So I think ours is the Weapons and Firearms Act. That's worth a read. But basically, when it comes to self-defense, I mean, you have a right to defend yourself as soon as you feel physically threatened. You are supposed to use appropriate force. What's appropriate force? You're not really meant to, in layman's terms, you're not really meant to deliver more damage to your opponent than they were going to deliver to you. How do you prove that? Well, that's a hard one. Obviously, you're going to have a lot of difficulty if they are armed and there's verbal confrontation and you kill them. You're going to have a really hard time justifying that. If they were armed and you break their nose, I mean, you're going to have an easier time of justifying that. As I said, anything that I say, you can't blame on the Success Sensei. You can't say that I said it was okay. So I mean, you're going to have to come up with your own moral compass. You might have to do your own due diligence as regards the law. You'll have to ask your own coach and go through your own scenarios. It's easier if you have these your own ideas firmly in place, so you're not, or your own plans firmly in place, so you're not trying to figure it out in the moment. Again, if you're trying to figure it out in the moment when something happens and it was unexpected, yet again you're way down the statistics of being able to appropriately defend yourself. You know, and this is the thing about fighting. People see fighters, they see them pull out an amazing countering combination, or they see them pulling out an amazing technique and they go, wow. You know, they have the perception that it was totally spontaneous. Aren't they amazing athletes? That was incredible. Wow, they were so fast. But what they don't realize is that particular combination or that counter, or you know, whatever it was that they were impressed with, was probably practiced for thousands and thousands of times. It was probably run in a prearranged routine. So it's not as spontaneous as it appears to be. Like, for example, if your opponent kicks you with a roundhouse kick in the body, and then your opponent throws another roundhouse kick in the body, and you manage to block that one, or you don't block it again, and you've been hit with it twice. It's not going to take a rocket scientist to realize that more than likely your opponent will go back to that kick again, because they've hit you with it already, and they've used it already. So if you then have a move that you practice thousands of times to counter, or to capture the leg and sweep if it's MMA takedown, or to counter and strike, which is one of the largest knockouts, one of the biggest knockouts in kickboxing, is someone throws a roundhouse kick and you block and counter with the right hand or the overhand right or the cross at the same time. That's probably the number one knockout in kickboxing. But if you've been practicing that thousands and thousands of times, and you've been kicked with in the duration of the match, you've been kicked with this roundhouse kick twice, you now know it's highly likely you're watching your opponent's shoulders, you block, count at the same time, and everybody just kind of sees that segment of time and thinks, wow, that was, you know, very quick and very impressive. But it's not as spontaneous as it appears to be. So we can use this. We can take the professional fighter's mindset to self-defense. If you have an idea at what point you're going to defend yourself and what you're going to do, if you don't have to meditate about for hours regarding it, but if you already have that decided, it makes the process easier. I mean, me personally, it's as soon as someone puts their hand on me. As soon as somebody puts their hand on me, I know it's going to escalate from there. They haven't gone to there just to back off. They're not going to. If somebody is standing in front of you and they're saying, you know, that they are going to kill you, or they're going to rip your head off, and using many expletives, and they're telling you exactly what they're going to do, you don't have to wait. Whoever hits first generally gets, you know, the element of surprise, and that can be you. So you can be the first one. As I said, in martial arts, it's called preemptive striking. So that is when your opponent confronts you, they may have pushed you, they may be telling you they're going to attack you, and they want your money, or they want, Oh yeah, and before I get on to the striking and getting out of there, if you reckon it is simply about money, a common thing that used to be taught years ago is throw your money. Just take your money out of your pocket, fire your money one way, and you run the other way. But I mean, it's not worth risking your life over the contents of your wallet or your phone. Throw it one way, you leg it the other way. What I'm talking about is when you don't have the option of being able to do that, or your back is, there's 2 or 3 people, or your back is against the wall, or you reckon fairly strong that your suspicion is like, no matter if you comply or not, you're still captured, and it's going to escalate from there, which is the way kind of things that work nowadays. Before, you'd hand a mugger your money, and that would be the end of that exchange. But now, so many cases, and I'm not scaremongering, but there are so many cases that you hand someone your money and then they stab you so that you can't go after them, or or it gets worse from there. They detain you, or that's not the end of it. And you've used logic and you've justified it to yourself. Well, if I comply, they'll leave me alone. The scenario won't get any worse. And unfortunately, that's not always the case. So, as I said, you're going to have to make up your own mind as to your own internal beliefs and your own moral values, and how you would react appropriately. Deciding at what point to preemptive strike, to throw a strike, as I said, generally is if you can make that decision early on, if they touch you, or because it is going to escalate. I mean, the pre-fight ritual is somebody does a push, then especially for younger people assaults, it's somebody does a push, then pushes you again. It's basically checking to see if you're going to defend yourself or not. After a couple of pushes, it's going to be a strike. After a strike, if you're still not defending yourself, it could very likely be kicking you on the ground. I mean, at every stage, you're saying to yourself, if they were logical people like myself, I'm not going to make them angry. So by not defending myself, they're going to stop the onslaught earlier on. But I mean, unfortunately, that's not the mentality of the people that are going to be attacking you. I mean, they might not even stop when you're unconscious. So from a self-defense point of view, I don't see how you're going to be worse off by attempting to defend yourself. Even if things really go terribly wrong, from a psychological healing point of view afterwards, having gotten beaten up and not complying in any way, shape or form, versus getting beaten up, but at least you tried your best, you made the best account of yourself that you could. I think your psychological scars will heal a lot quicker in the second case of when you've actually made an attempt. I really don't see in this day and age the way the reports of the physical confrontations that I read and that I see and that I hear about from the people training with me, I don't see how it's going to be any worse than if you do attempt to defend yourself. So when you've decided to turn on that switch, and I do imagine it like a light switch, and I think the hardest part about defending yourself is turning on the switch and allowing yourself to turn on the switch, and knowing when to turn on that light switch to allow yourself to actually do something. And this is a big issue for people who have trained for many years. For martial artists who have trained for decades can still freeze in fearful situations, and physical confrontation is a fearful situation. Adrenaline is surging, your nerves are there, you weren't expecting it, you're in shock, you're caught by surprise. So even if you are trained, you can still be rendered with the inability of being able to defend yourself and freezing. So there's many reports of people who are black belts and they completely just froze and took a hiding and weren't even able to make any kind of account of themselves, despite the many hours, despite their many accolades in competition or in the dojo. So it's not really about that. It's allowing yourself to turn on the switch. So turning on the switch means basically you've made the decision, I am now going to perform a strike. What strike do you perform? You know what? It really doesn't matter to me. A large gross motor skill is what you need to do. What does that mean? It means whatever is natural to you. I mean, if you haven't done martial arts before, a big open hand strike or a big punch or a big kick. what you're trying to do is not incapacitate your opponent. You're not trying to turn this into a Bruce Lee fight. What you're trying to do is strike and run. You're trying to create an opening. So once you've done your strike, whether it knocks them out, which is very highly unlikely, or injures them or renders them immobile and not able to continue, that's all irrelevant. Even if it doesn't hit them, if it evokes any kind of a response or reaction and turns the tables for a split second where they got a little bit of a surprise, you run. So you break for the opening and you continue running. That's what I mean turning on the switch is about. You've made a decision, you're going to do it. Once the switch is on, in combat sports, when you decide that you want to initiate an attack, you don't dwell on it. You're meant to do it immediately. So if I decide I'm going to jump in with a jab cross hook punch to the body, I should do it straight away. I shouldn't read the more I delay with it, the more my opponent can see my intentions. So as soon as I think front kick into roundhouse kick, or I think anything, question mark kick, or I think I'm going to not in the street, but in competition I'm talking about here. I'm talking about kickboxing or MMA. You're meant to do it. Your opponent will read your intention the longer. Yeah, sure, you set things up. Of course you do. You set up and you use strategy. But when you think of a particular attack, you do it. You think of a jab. You think of a cross. You think of jab, cross. You don't put a big long delay and try to wait for the perfect opportunity to do it. So when you turn on that switch, once that switch is on, it means you need to throw a strike and get out of there as quickly as possible. As I said, it's all about surviving and increasing your statistics of survival and not getting injured, or reducing injury as much as you can. From that point on, to imagine that other people are going to suddenly run to your rescue, I mean, it would be a lovely thought. It would be nice to think that some hero is going to come along and defend your honor and protect you. But unfortunately, yet again, that's not the case. If that happens, great. But again, the mindset of a professional fighter is to train for the worst case scenario. Train for the worst case scenario, hopefully you'll be pleasantly surprised. Train for the toughest, meanest, fittest, best, fastest opponent that you can possibly imagine, and hopefully then you're wrong and it's easier than that. So don't immediately assume people are going to run to your aid. Imagine that they're not. Therefore, if it happens, great. And if it doesn't, you will keep doing what you have to do in order to be able to extract yourself from that situation. So what that means is, if you need to use multiple strikes, if that first strike and you were grabbed by somebody else, or you didn't get the exit that you were looking for, obviously you throw another strike. You don't make yourself an easy target. Most people mugging would rather an easier target than a harder target. And really, if that's what it's all about, hopefully they will just move on, because they have many other options. Not that you want to be sending that kind of bad luck to anybody else, but you don't want it to be you. That's your objective. So if you go to the ground, if you end up on the ground, you get back up onto your feet as quick as possible. How do you do that? Once you get onto a knee, you're up. So you try to, and that's an MMA philosophy. So when you're on your back, you should never be flat on your back. When you're flat on your back, you should never be flat on your back. You always try to stay on a hip, or you always try to tilt your hips a little bit, so you're never you might look flat on your back, but you're not. And you're trying to prepare to do something else. So you're not flat out. You're trying to get to a knee, you're trying to stand up, and you're trying to then run. The scenario can get uglier and uglier and uglier, and it can get more and more complicated. So this is the point where I tell you that really, if it's something that does worry you, if all this subject is something that does worry you, you should enlist in self-defense or martial arts or something. You know, I'm not going to try to sell you on training with me and training with my club, but you're more than welcome. There's many options for many people. So if it is something that worries you, or you think about it at night before you fall asleep, or you have bad dreams all the time of being attacked, just do a simple 10-week course, or do a simple weekend course, and just arm yourself with a little bit more confidence. Not false confidence now, but a little bit more confidence, and knowing a little bit more the answers to the questions, should it ever happen. I mean, statistically, if your awareness is good, it's not it's unlikely that it's going to happen. As you go into adulthood as well, it's less likely. As a teenager, I think you're a lot more vulnerable. As you become an adult, it's a hell of a lot less likely that it's going to happen. And I do think the working environment is becoming safer. I know we have a long way to go regarding bullying and everything else, but I do think on a day-to-day basis, life is getting a lot safer. But that does make me worry then that when we are in a situation that you're physically confronted, because life has gotten safer on a day-to-day basis, that we haven't thought about any of these, any of our beliefs in defending themselves, and we might have reduced our ability to defend ourselves. So I do think it's something that you should look at. Everyone should look at some stage in their life. The way I believe everybody should probably, really, on paper, everybody should have some type of self-defense training at some stage in their life. Everybody should probably have some type of first aid, CPR experience at some stage, in their life. They should do it. We should do it self-defense as well. We should have some type of self-defense. Now, whether you're interested in competitive martial arts or anything like that is irrelevant. You should have some type of self-defense training. And it makes looking at those horror movies a little bit easier, because you think, I do this and I do that and I do the other. So the most important part is, don't be afraid to think of it. Don't drive yourself mad. Don't make yourself paranoid. But certainly have a think in your mind of what would you do in certain scenarios. As I said, enroll yourself in some type of martial arts or some type of self-defense training if it is a genuine worry of yours, and if it's not, fair play to you. And just because you've done a lot of training and just because you feel confident in your abilities, that still doesn't mean that statistics will be on your side in certain scenarios. So make sure you don't get too cocky. But try not, when you're confident in yourself, even the process of being a little bit more confident in being able to handle verbal or physical confrontation makes it less likely that it's going to happen to you. So keep that in mind. It's a catch-22. If you're not confident about it, it's like a pothole on the road, and you're driving along straight, but you're looking at the pothole thinking, I don't want to hit that pothole. And when you're looking at the pothole and you're driving, that's what you're focused on, you inevitably kind of drive into it anyway. So you're not meant to focus on the negative, because that can, the catch-22, nearly attract a situation happening. If you appear to be very fearful, it can make you an easy target. So as I said, even just thinking about it can give you a little bit more confidence. Talk to a friend that has done martial arts, or ask somebody what they would do, and help set out some kind of procedures that if something ever did happen, just to give you a little bit more confidence in being able to physically defend yourself or to extract yourself from a situation should the need ever arise. And as I said, statistics are on your side that the need won't arise, and hopefully you'll stay very safe and you'll never need to use any of what we've just been talking about. So thank you for listening. I'm Roundhouse Rob, the Success Sensei. Life is a fight you can enjoy and win. Bowing out.
This has been the Success Sensei, fighting the winning fight. So add us, subscribe, like, and comment. Keep those hands up and keep moving forward.